we're going to talk a little bit about this concept of coach developer and thinking a little bit outside of the academic space and talk about if we're talking about coaches and better training and better education opportunities that we're providing them, how are we providing that? And I'm really excited to have Dr. Melissa Thompson from the University of Southern Mississippi, probably one of my closest colleagues and friends that as we've gone through grad school and all this together, but this shared mission and passion has driven a lot of the work that I do and the stuff I do, and I'm always inspired by the way that she thinks about this and brings it together. So I'm looking forward to what she can share with all of us today.
Thank you so much, Kristen, and to West Virginia University for hosting this important and timely conversation, and certainly for the invitation to be part of it. As Kristen mentioned, I'm a faculty member at the University of Southern Mississippi, where I direct our fully online master's degree in sport coaching education. Fun fact, I didn't always want to be a college professor. In fact, as an undergraduate student, I studied elementary education and spent 4 years in coursework with this culminating student teaching experience where I had a highly structured mentor in the classroom for a semester that by the time, halfway through the semester, you had taken over the full workings of an undergraduate classroom, or as of an elementary classroom. And by the end of this semester-long experience, I was sitting in a classroom much like this one and had this thought about, well, in a month or two, I'm going to be the teacher. I'm going to be the lead teacher. And this wave of uncertainty enveloped me, and I thought parents shouldn't drop their children off with me. And it totally changed the way I thought about professional preparation, because I had, in all intents and purposes, been prepared for the job in which I thought I was going to be doing. And so then when I think about what we ask volunteer coaches to do, especially at the youth sport level, it makes sense to me why it's a bit challenging sometimes for us to get parents to volunteer. And it's not because that they're not interested. They want to be involved. So I think that there is some challenge for us to think about while we're talking today about how we overcome that feeling of uncertainty or lack of preparation. And I think that's one of our most critical challenges. But it's not what I'm going to spend the majority of my time talking about today. I'm going to spend most of the time talking about, once we get them in, how can we best develop them and retain them? Because I really think that one of the critical pieces of our coach development system is figuring out how to not lose the 50% of youth sport coaches over time. Because we don't learn how to do any profession overnight. It takes time. So if we know that, then we want to make sure that we're providing opportunities to develop coaches. So I'm going to spend some time talking about the role of the coach developer. So when we look at the International Coach Developer Framework, the way in which coach developers are defined is individuals trained to develop and support and challenge coaches to go on honing and improving their knowledge and skills to provide positive and effective sport experiences for all participants. So it's this idea of challenge and support. It's a critical role. And we call this coach development in the literature right now, coach developers. But these individuals really actually serve a variety of different roles in the U.S. sports system. Use this clip and see if that works. So we call them a lot of different things in our sports system. And so when you first glance at this, you might be thinking, well, that's not really what athletic directors do, or that's not really what program directors do. It's not really what college professors do. But in fact, each individual in these roles has certain responsibilities around the development of coaches in the system. But to best understand that role, that responsibility of coach development, we have to kind of just take a step back for just a moment and talk about what we know about how coaches learn. So I'm going to give kind of 3 main points from the literature of what we know about how coaches learn. And I know that this is a gross generalization about the entire body of literature around coach development, but it will help guide a little bit of the conversation about what we need to know about what the role of the coach developer is. So first, and as Laura mentioned a little bit earlier, we know that coaches learn in a variety of situations, some of those being formal, and those are less frequent for coaches than the everyday experience-based learning that they're getting while they're actually doing the process of coaching. And so we have to understand that if coaches are learning a significant portion in the practice of coaching, then some of our support for them also has to be in that practice. We can't only provide support for coaches and coach development in a formal or in a clinic-based setting, because that's not really where they're spending a lot of their time. And this should look familiar to you. Based on Jennifer Moon's work around this concept of how we learn and this network learning piece, there's this idea that we each come with, as adult learners, with a structure that accounts for all of our accumulated experiences and knowledge to any given point. So as we all came in the room this morning, we had one cognitive structure, but in this perception, in this model, Jennifer Moon would suggest that by now our cognitive structure has changed because we've heard from lots of different individuals and we've thought about different ideas, and so we integrate our experiences and pieces of knowledge into what we already know, and it changes that structure at all times. And why this is so critical for us to understand around coaching and coach development is that every coach who comes to us in any sort of coach development situation has their own unique set of skills, ability, knowledge, experiences that have accumulated over time to be the cognitive structure that person holds. So it's very difficult, and as Rock mentioned, this idea of predictability, it's very difficult for us to predict what any given coach will need at any given time along their developmental pathway, because everyone is at their own unique spot. And then one last piece I'll just kind of share is that there is significant support around this idea of social learning for coaches in the literature, and that we learn from one another. We socially construct ideas, we share those ideas, we wrestle with challenges with one another. But what we also know from the literature is that the competitive level increases, so does a coach's sense of isolation and their withdrawal from their peers. So they're less likely to share with one another when the competitive level increases. And so we need to account for that as we think about how we help prepare coaches and continue their development over time. So if we know all of those things around coach learning, then it'll help us conceptualize the different roles and responsibilities of the coach developer. So I'll go back to this idea of coach developer with this quote from the late Pat Duffy, where he talks about coach developers not just being subject matter experts and not only delivering courses, and I think we've talked a little bit about that today. Coach education and development isn't just about this training or this workshop. It's about really understanding how people learn in their profession over time, and how do we best then support those individuals. So the International Coach Developer Framework really identifies 5 or 6 kind of main roles and responsibilities that coach developers take on in different roles. And I'm just going to kind of give a brief overview of the differences in these, because I think what's interesting about this is that in each of our organizations, we are going to be looking for individuals to fill out this professional body of individuals who will help develop our coaches. We have to have an army of professionals to develop coaches. And I believe that those people probably already exist to some extent in our organizations. It's just about identifying the unique skills and abilities that those individuals possess and how we might then use those in a coach developer role. So if we think about the different roles, certainly there is the clinic setting or coach training or education setting in which we need individuals who are really good at facilitating. They are really good at questioning and listening, checking for understanding. They understand something around the pedagogy of adults, and they're good at the facilitation piece. We may also, in our coach development systems, have quality assurance checks where we're sending people in the field to observe coaches in their practice and check for competency around the things that the individual organization deems as necessary. And certainly this is true in a higher education setting because we're providing some sort of quality mark or grade at the end of the semester. And so the skills necessary to assess someone and really talk about assessment as formative are certainly different than facilitation skills. Also, when we start looking at helping people understand their own personal development pathway, that kind of leadership, those skills are are a unique skill set as well. And mentoring. So in any given organization, we might have coaches who are longtime coaches who are really interested in developing the next generation of coaches through a mentoring process. That's a unique set of skills, and we want to help those individuals develop those skills so that we can best utilize their knowledge and that our organization doesn't lose that knowledge along the way. And then I think we've talked a good bit about this today, but if we're thinking about the system as a whole and designing coach development systems as a whole, we really have a need for individuals who have an understanding around program design. So, what does, for example, a high-quality learning objective look like, and how do we meet that in practice? And really, how can we map out an entire curriculum that would ensure that we're messaging across all of our coaches consistently, which I think gets a little bit to what Andy was talking about earlier when we talk about educating the masses, which is a very different thing conceptually for us to think about than that one-on-one kind of mentor approach that might be really critical for our coaches who are longtime coaches who are really working on specific individual developmental goals. And then finally, this piece around program evaluation, that as we continue to think about, how do we know that the things that we're doing around coach development are effective if we're not evaluating them, and if we're not willing to then use the results of those evaluations to make any sort of substantial change in what we're doing. And so I think in general, when we talk about coach development, we've been saying this over and over again today, that we believe that better coach development will lead to better coaches, and that better coaches will lead to better athlete experiences. And that really is the ultimate goal of the USCCE, but also just coach development and sport in general, is we want athletes to have positive experiences. But I think we're going to have to keep in mind in the conversation today that quality coaching will continue to be the limiting factor in the experience of the athlete. Yes, parents are also important. Parents also go away during practice to some extent. And so we really have to think about the central role of the coach in that experience. So if we want better coaches, then we have to understand how coaches learn, and how can we support them on their own individual, unique journey and pathway in their coaching profession, in their development. And in order to do that, we really have to have the hard conversation today about what a sport culture looks like that values the journey of the coach and the preparation of the coach as much, if not more, as the destination and the win. Thank you.